The soft hiss of a zipper cutting through the midnight silence of a $30 million Tribeca penthouse was the only sound Gideon Roth made. He moved like a ghost in his own home, past the Murano glass sculptures and the Jean-Michel Basquiat painting that hung in the foyer. In the master bedroom, illuminated only by the cold blue glow of the city, outside his wife Naomi slept, her body curled around the precious new life growing within her. Their son was the picture of peaceful trust, a trust Gideon was about to detonate. He wouldn't even leave a note. Notes were for sentimental fools. He was leaving a life behind, and by morning, the only evidence of his departure would be the empty space beside his sleeping, pregnant wife. The air in the penthouse was chilled to a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature Gideon insisted upon for optimal sleep. Tonight, however, the cold felt different. It was the sterile, unforgiving cold of a decision made. Gideon Roth, CEO of Nexus Capital, and a man whose face had graced the cover of Forbes under the headline, "The Digital Midas," was performing the final, quietest act of a meticulously planned betrayal. His bag, a sleek leather weekender from Bottega Veneta, was already packed. It sat by the door of his cavernous walk-in closet, filled not with the bespoke Brioni suits he wore to command boardrooms, but with the casual expensive linens of a man disappearing to paradise. A Patek Philippe watch with a dual time zone function, a gift from Naomi for their 3rd anniversary, was already strapped to his wrist. One time zone was set to New York. The other was already set for the Leeward Islands. He paused at the bedroom door, his hand hovering over the cool brass handle. A flicker of something guilt, perhaps, or a vestige of the man he used to be made him look back. Naomi shifted in her sleep, a soft murmur escaping her lips. Her hand rested protectively on the swell of her belly, now 7 months along. They had been ecstatic at the ultrasound just last week, watching the tiny, thrumming heartbeat of their son. They'd already named him Leo. Gideon had held her hand, his eyes misty, and sworn he'd never felt a love so profound. It was a flawless performance. The memory should have paralyzed him. Instead, it was gasoline on the fire of his desperation. That life, the one of impending fatherhood, of PTA meetings and suburban obligations, felt like a gilded cage closing in on him. Naomi, with her gentle strength, her unwavering belief in him, her perfect pedigree and social grace, had become the beautiful, unknowing warden. He felt suffocated by the sheer, unblemished goodness of it all. He craved chaos. He craved the thrilling, selfish pulse of a life lived for no one but himself. And that pulse had a name: Kendra Lowell. His phone buzzed silently in his pocket, a single vibration he had programmed just for her. Wheels up in 45. The driver is at the corner of Greenwich and Nen Moor. Kendra. She was everything Naomi was not. Ambitious, sharp-edged, and utterly unsentimental. A PR executive from a rival firm, she had met Gideon at a tech gala 6 months ago. Their affair had started with clandestine lunches at forgotten downtown bistros and escalated to stolen weekends in the Hamptons while Naomi visited her parents in Connecticut. With Kendra, he wasn't a future father or a husband. He was just Gideon, a powerful, desired man. She didn't want a family. She wanted the world, and she saw him as the rocket to get her there. He knew it, and he didn't care. Her ambition was a mirror to his own. He pulled the bedroom door shut with an almost imperceptible click. In the hallway, the sterile silence of the apartment seemed to judge him. Every piece of art, every custom-designed piece of furniture was a testament to the life he and Naomi had built. a life he was now throwing away like a losing stock. He slipped on his driving loafers, grabbed the bag, and walked towards the private elevator that opened directly into his apartment. As he pressed the button, his reflection stared back at him from the polished bronze doors, a handsome man in his late 30s, his dark hair perfectly styled. Even at this hour, his jaw set. He looked like a man in complete control, but inside his heart hammered against his ribs a frantic drumbeat of fear and exhilaration. The elevator descended a smooth, silent drop from his life in the sky to the waiting escape on the street. He stepped out into the pre-dawn chill of Manhattan. A black Cadillac Escalade was idling exactly where Kendra said it would be. The driver, a discreet professional from a private service he didn't recognize, stepped out and took his bag without a word. Gideon slid into the plush leather interior. The city lights blurred as the car pulled away from the curb. He didn't look back at the monolithic glass tower, where his pregnant wife slept, dreaming, he presumed, of the perfect life they shared. He couldn't afford to. He took out his phone and typed a single message to Kendra. "On my way. Burn the ships." Her reply was instantaneous. "The fires are already lit, baby." A slow smile spread across Gideon's face. It was done. He was free, or so he thought. The Gulfstream GC650 cut through the stratosphere, a silver needle stitching a path from the cold reality of New York to the fantasy of St. Bart's. Inside the world was champagne and soft leather. Kendra Lowell was draped across the seat opposite Gideon, her long, tanned legs propped up on the edge of his. She was wearing a silk jumpsuit that shimmered under the cabin's soft lighting, and her laughter was as bright and bubbly as the Dom Perignon in her flute. "To us," she said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings, and to never having to check into a hotel under the name Mr. Smith again." Gideon clinked his glass against hers. "To St. Bart's." He watched her as she sipped her champagne, her eyes sparkling with triumph. Kendra was beautiful, undeniably so, but her allure was more than just physical. It was her razor-sharp ambition, the way she looked at the world as a series of objectives to be conquered. She had conquered him, and it was a surrender he had welcomed. "Did you—" She began, her voice dropping slightly, the only hint of vulnerability she ever showed. "She was asleep," Gideon said, cutting her off. He didn't want to talk about Naomi. He didn't want to picture her waking up reaching for him and finding only cold sheets. "She won't know anything until morning. By then we'll be having breakfast overlooking the Caribbean." Kendra's smile returned brighter than before. "Good. No loose ends. My boss at Edelman is going to have a conniption when he gets my resignation email. But then again, dating the CEO of Nexus Capital is a bit of a conflict of interest. Wouldn't you say?" "Ex-CEO soon enough," Gideon mused, swirling the scotch in his tumbler. That was part of the plan. He had already set in motion his sabbatical. He would step down, citing personal reasons and burnout, handing the reins to his competent but uninspired COO Robert. He had liquidated a significant portion of his personal stock portfolio over the past few months, funneling the money into untraceable offshore accounts. He had built an empire, and now he was walking away with a king's ransom. The flight passed in a haze of alcohol and intoxicating plans for the future. They talked about buying a villa in Monaco, a yacht to sail the Greek islands, attending the Cannes Film Festival, not as guests, but as power players. It was a fantasy woven from money and ego, and for Gideon, it was the perfect antidote to the quiet domestic life that had begun to feel like a death sentence. They landed at Gustav III Airport, the notoriously short runway, a thrilling welcome to the island. A private concierge met them on the tarmac, whisking them through customs and into a waiting Range Rover. The villa was a modernist masterpiece carved into the cliffs of Gouverneur, with an infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the turquoise sea. "It's perfect," Kendra breathed. Walking through the open-plan living area and out onto the sprawling terrace. "I had it booked for weeks," Gideon said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. He inhaled the scent of her perfume, a heady mix of tuberose and ambition. This was real. The weight of his other life was an ocean away. The first 24 hours were idyllic. They swam in the pool, drank rosé on the sun-drenched terrace, and made love with a desperate energy, as if to physically erase any lingering trace of his past. Gideon felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. He didn't check his New York phone, which he had powered down and tucked into the bottom of his suitcase. He was off the grid. He was a new man. The first crack in the perfect facade appeared the next afternoon. He was lounging by the pool while Kendra was on a video call with her lawyer, finalizing the details of her wrongful termination suit against her old firm, a golden parachute she'd engineered with Gideon's help. His burner phone, a simple prepaid device for emergencies, buzzed on the table beside him. It was a number he didn't recognize, but the New York area code sent a jolt of anxiety through him. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. On the fourth call, he answered, his voice clipped. "Hello. Is this Gideon Roth?" The voice was professional female and unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Lena Hansen. I'm Naomi Roth's obstetrician. I'm calling because we had her 30-week scan scheduled for this morning and she missed the appointment. We've been unable to reach her on her cell or the home phone. Given the circumstances, we thought it best to try her emergency contacts." Gideon's blood ran cold. "The circumstances? What circumstances?" "It was a high-risk appointment, Mr. Roth. We noted a slight arrhythmia in the baby's heartbeat last week and wanted to monitor it closely. It's likely nothing, but we never advise missing these scans. Is Naomi with you?" "Is she all right?" The world tilted on its axis. An arrhythmia. Naomi had told him the doctor said everything was perfect. Had she been protecting him from worry? Or had she simply not wanted to burden him? The image of her alone in that vast apartment, possibly worried or unwell, pierced through his bubble of selfish bliss. The baby. Leo, his son. I'm not with her, he stammered. "I'm traveling for work." The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. "I'll try and reach her right away." He hung up his hand, trembling. He tried Naomi's number from his burner phone. It went straight to voicemail. Her inbox was full. He tried the landline. It rang and rang until the automated operator took over. Panic began to claw at his throat. What if something was wrong? What if she'd woken up? Realized he was gone, and the shock had sent her into premature labor. What if she was hurt alone, unable to call for help? Kendra finished her call and sauntered over, stretching languidly like a cat. "Good news. They're settling." "Who was that?" "Wrong number." Gideon lied, his mind racing. The paradise he had built was suddenly a prison. The sun felt too hot, the sea too loud. The beautiful woman beside him looked like a stranger. In that moment, he realized that you can't burn a ship if your entire life is still on board. He had to go back. He had to make sure she was okay. He would tell her some lie, a sudden unavoidable business crisis in Zurich. He was good at lying. He just needed to see her to know that she and the baby were safe. Then he could disappear for good. Change of plans. He said, his voice strained. "We have to go back. There's an emergency at the company." Kendra's face fell, her perfect smile replaced by a mask of petulant disbelief. "What Gideon know? You said you were done. We just got here." "It's non-negotiable," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He was already on the phone with the aviation charter, his voice all command and authority again. "I need my jet fueled and ready for departure. Destination Teterboro, immediately." The escape was over. He was flying back into the storm, completely unaware that the storm was not what he thought it was. It was not a medical emergency or a heartbroken wife. It was something far colder, far more calculated, and it was waiting for him patiently in his home office. The sun rose over Manhattan, casting long shadows between the skyscrapers. In the Roths' penthouse, the morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the silent air. The bed, an acre of white Egyptian cotton, was empty on one side. The indentation of Gideon's head was still faintly visible on his pillow. Naomi Roth did not wake with a start. She did not wake with a gasp or a frantic search for the man who was supposed to be beside her. She awoke slowly, calmly at her usual time of 6:30 a.m., as the internal clock of her pregnancy had dictated for months. She lay still for a moment, feeling the gentle flutter of her son kicking beneath her ribs. She smiled a genuine, private smile. "Good morning, Leo," she whispered to her belly. Then, with a resolve that was as quiet and profound as the sunrise itself, she sat up. She looked at the empty side of the bed. She noted the missing weekender bag from Gideon's closet, the space on his valet tray where his Patek Philippe watch usually sat. There was no panic, no tears, just a deep, cold sense of confirmation. For a woman who looked the part of a pampered socialite, Naomi possessed a mind like a steel trap. Before she was Mrs. Gideon Roth, she was Naomi Prescott, a rising star in the world of forensic accounting. She had worked for Deloitte, specializing in uncovering complex financial fraud within multinational corporations. She could follow a single dollar through a labyrinth of shell companies, offshore accounts, and fraudulent invoices. She noticed patterns others missed. She was trained to see the truth buried beneath layers of deception. She had resigned after marrying Gideon, eager to embrace a new life. But the skills once honed never truly dulled. And for the past 4 months, she had been conducting the most important investigation of her career: her own husband. It had started with a subtle tell. A second phone she'd found charging in his gym bag, which he'd clumsily explained away as a dedicated international line for a sensitive deal in Singapore. Then came the unusual cash withdrawals from a secondary account, large, sporadic, and always just under the $10,000 federal reporting limit. To anyone else, they were nothing. To Naomi, they were red flags. She didn't confront him. She didn't cry or scream. She observed. She became the ghost in her own marriage, silently gathering data. While Gideon slept, she used her knowledge of his habits. His passwords were all variations of his first dog's name, and the year he founded his company, to access his personal accounts. What she found was a meticulously constructed secret life. She hired a private investigator, a discreet ex-Mossad agent named Ari, who charged a small fortune and was worth every penny. Ari had provided the name Kendra Lowell. He provided photos of them at a secluded hotel in the Berkshires of Kendra, driving a new Porsche Cayenne, a car registered to a Delaware-based LLC that Naomi quickly traced back to a slush fund Gideon had set up years ago. But the real evidence, the kind that truly mattered, she found herself. Digging into Nexus Capital's financials, she discovered a pattern of consulting fees being paid out to that same LLC. Gideon was embezzling from his own company, siphoning millions of dollars to fund his affair and build his escape hatch. He was a brilliant CEO, but a sloppy criminal, blinded by arrogance. He never imagined his gentle art history major wife would be capable of untangling his web. He had catastrophically underestimated her. This morning was not a discovery. It was an execution. She rose from the bed and went not to the phone to call her friends in a panic, but to her home office. She bypassed the sleek Mac on her own desk and went to Gideon's imposing mahogany desk. She turned on his computer. A moment later, she was past his firewalls, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She downloaded the final pieces of evidence from the keylogger she had installed on his machine a month ago, transcripts of his encrypted chats with Kendra, his recent liquidation of personal stocks, the wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. It was all there. A complete portrait of a man dismantling his life in preparation for a new one. At 7:15 a.m., she missed a call from her obstetrician, Dr. Hansen. She saw the name flash on the screen and silenced it. She had fabricated the arrhythmia story and told the doctor's office last week that she would be unreachable for a few days due to a family matter, asking them to please try her husband's number if they needed anything for scheduling. It was a cruel, necessary breadcrumb, a way to puncture his bubble of paradise and reel him back. At 8:00 a.m., she called her lawyer, Benjamin Carter, a bulldog of a man who specialized in high-asset divorces. "He's gone." "Ben," she said, her voice steady. "He left last night. The plan is in motion. The documents are ready." Naomi Carter's voice crackled over the phone. "Are you sure about this? Once we file, there's no going back." "I've been sure for months," she said. She looked around the opulent penthouse at the life Gideon had bought, a life he thought defined her. He thinks he was escaping a cage. He has no idea he just walked into a trap. She spent the rest of the day in a state of hyper-focused calm. She ate a healthy breakfast for the baby. She did her prenatal yoga. She packed a small bag for herself, not with designer clothes, but with essentials. A laptop, several hard drives, and a thick file folder bound with a rubber band. She wasn't a woman scorned. She was a predator whose prey had finally taken the bait. While Gideon was flying back across the Atlantic, fueled by a manufactured panic, Naomi was preparing the battlefield. The confrontation wouldn't be a tearful showdown in their bedroom. It would be a corporate execution in the one place he felt most powerful, his office. And she would be the one holding the axe. The descent into Teterboro Airport was turbulent. The Gulf Stream shuddered as it passed through a thick bank of clouds, and for Gideon the physical jolts were a perfect match for the chaos raging in his mind. The idyllic haze of St. Bart's had evaporated, replaced by the cold, sharp-edged panic of a man whose carefully constructed worlds were about to collide. Kendra sat across from him, sullen and silent. She had barely spoken a word since his abrupt decision to leave. Her arms were crossed, her face a mask of bitter disappointment. The dream had lasted less than a day. "I don't understand why I couldn't just stay at the villa," she said for the 5th time, her voice tight with resentment. "You could have handled this and come back." "It's complicated, Kendra." Gideon snapped his patience worn thin. "My COO is calling a snapboard meeting. Something about a potential hostile takeover bid. It's all hands on deck. I need to be there." This was the lie he had settled on during the frantic flight. It was plausible urgent, and painted him as the indispensable hero swooping in to save his company. It was a much better narrative than I panicked because my pregnant wife's doctor called. He had even called his COO, Robert, and left a vague, authoritative voicemail about rumors and the need to circle the wagons, laying the groundwork for his story. So this is it? Then Kendra asked, her voice laced with accusation. We run away, and the first sign of trouble you run right back. This isn't running back, he insisted, leaning forward. This is protecting the assets. Our assets. The money, the resources for our future. It's all tied to Nexus. I have to put this fire out, and then I'm done. I promise. She looked at him, her sharp eyes searching his for any sign of weakness. She was a transactionalist at her core. As long as the ultimate payout was secure, she could tolerate a delay. Finally, she nodded. Fine. But you're putting me up at the Mandarin Oriental. And this had better be quick, Gid. As soon as the jet's wheels touched the tarmac, Gideon's world split. He became two men. One was the suave lover, ushering Kendra into a waiting town car, with a kiss and a promise to call her as soon as he was free. The other was the worried husband, pulling out his New York phone and dialing Naomi's number with shaking hands. Still voicemail. He called the doorman at their building. Frank, it's Gideon Roth. Have you seen my wife this morning? Oh yes, Mr. Roth. Good morning, sir. Mrs. Roth left about an hour ago. A car picked her up. A car. Did you see what kind? A black town car, sir. Looked like a corporate service. Relief washed over Gideon so potent it almost made him dizzy. She was okay. She was up and about. She must have just gone to her doctor's appointment late. The arrhythmia was probably nothing, just as the doctor said. He had panicked over nothing. The guilt was instantly replaced by a fresh wave of irritation. He had cut his trip short, upset Kendra, and flown for 6 hours, all for a missed appointment. He got into his own waiting car, a sleek Audi A8, and barked directions to his driver. Nexus building, and step on it. During the drive into the city, he rehearsed his story for Naomi. He would be the hero. He'd heard about the takeover bid and had to come back immediately. He would express profound regret for not being able to tell her before he left, framing it as a selfless act to protect her from stress during the pregnancy. He would shower her with affection, promise her a makeup trip to any destination she desired. He would be so convincing, so loving, so utterly in control that she would never suspect a thing. By the time he was done, she would be apologizing to him for causing him to worry. His phone rang. It was Robert, his COO. Gideon. Thank God. What is this about a takeover? My phone has been ringing off the hook all morning. I've spoken to our largest shareholders, and no one has heard a thing. Are you sure your source is reliable? Gideon's brow furrowed. He had expected Robert to have heard the same rumors he had planted. Just get the board on a conference line for 3 p.m. We need to present a united front, he blustered, trying to maintain control of the narrative. The board is already here, Gideon. They're waiting for you in the main conference room. They've been here for an hour. What, why? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Robert's voice, when it came back, was strained and formal. They called the meeting Gideon, not me. They said it was urgent. They said it concerns your leadership. The blood drained from Gideon's face. This was not part of the plan. A board meeting called about him. It made no sense. He had delivered record profits for 10 consecutive quarters. He was the golden boy of fintech. He arrived at the towering glass headquarters of Nexus Capital a few minutes later. The lobby felt different, the usual deference of his employees replaced with nervous, averted glances. As he strode towards the executive elevators, his assistant, a young, perpetually terrified man named Peter, intercepted him. "Mr. Roth. They're waiting in the Olympus room. And, sir, your wife is here." Gideon stopped dead. "Naomi. Here." Why, Peter swallowed hard. "She's with them, sir, in the conference room. She asked me to give you this when you arrived." Peter handed him a single sealed manila envelope. Gideon's name was written on the front in Naomi's elegant, familiar script. His heart began to hammer against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. This was wrong. All of it was terribly, horribly wrong. He tore open the envelope. Inside was not a letter. It was a single, glossy photograph. It was a picture of the villa in Gouverneur, the one he and Kendra had just left. It was taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, but the image was crystal clear. Two figures stood on the terrace, champagne glasses in hand, their heads close together in a conspiratorial toast. Gideon and Kendra. The photo was time-stamped. Yesterday. 4:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The carefully constructed walls of his lies crumbled into dust. She knew. While he was basking in the sun, she knew. While he was flying back, panicking about her health, she knew. The doctor's call, the missed appointment. It was all a trap. He looked up from the photo, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening horror. He was not the predator returning to his den. He was the prey walking blindly into the abattoir. And his quiet, gentle, pregnant wife was the one holding the butcher's knife. The Olympus room was on the 80th floor, a glass-walled sanctuary reserved for the most critical meetings of Nexus Capital. It boasted a panoramic view of New York City, a vista that had always made Gideon feel like a king surveying his domain. Today it felt like he was walking the plank. He pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside. The air was thick with a tense, funereal silence. The entire board of directors was there 6 men and 2 women who owed their considerable wealth to his vision. They were seated around the massive granite table, their faces grim and unreadable. They did not look at him. Their eyes were all fixed on the person standing at the head of the table in the spot usually reserved for him. It was Naomi. She was wearing a simple but elegant navy blue maternity dress. Her hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, and her expression was one of serene, chilling composure. She looked directly at Gideon, her gaze not fiery with anger, but cold with the detached precision of a surgeon about to make the first incision. Beside her stood her lawyer, Benjamin Carter, his arms crossed, looking like a vulture, ready for a feast. "Gideon, Naomi," said her voice, calm and even, echoing slightly in the silent room. "Thank you for joining us. Please take a seat." She gestured to the single empty chair directly opposite her. It felt less like an invitation and more like a defendant being directed to the stand. He walked to the chair. On legs that felt like lead, the photograph still clutched in his hand. He dropped into the seat, his eyes darting from Naomi to the stone-faced board members. "Naomi, what is this?" He began, trying to inject a tone of bewildered authority into his voice. "What's going on?" Robert said something about a board meeting. "This is not a board meeting, Gideon." Naomi interrupted, her voice cutting through his bluff. "It's an intervention. or perhaps more accurately, a receivership. From a leather portfolio in front of her, she slid a thick, spiral-bound document across the granite table. It stopped directly in front of him. The cover read, Project Nightingale, an internal audit of the CEO's discretionary accounts. Project Nightingale. He whispered, his mouth suddenly dry. It's what they call the person who sings. Naomi said, a flicker of something almost pitying in her eyes. I thought it was appropriate. I suggest you open it. His hands trembled as he opened the report. It was his entire secret life laid bare in spreadsheets, charts, and financial statements. It was all there. The Delaware LLC, Lowell Holdings, the Porsche Cayenne, the wire transfers to the Cayman Islands, the fraudulent consulting fees paid out from Nexus Capital's accounts. It wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was a meticulously documented case of felony embezzlement. Page after page, his crimes were laid out in the cold, irrefutable language of forensic accounting. Naomi had missed nothing. She had tracked every dollar, every secret transaction, every lie. She had even included a projected timeline of his planned sabbatical, cross-referencing it with the liquidation of his stocks and the offshore transfers, presenting it as a clear plan to abscond with company funds. How he breathed, looking up at her, his mind reeling. How did you? You thought I spent my days planning charity galas and picking out nursery colors. Didn't you? Naomi said, her voice still quiet, yet it filled the entire room. You forgot who I was before I met you. You saw what you wanted to see, a beautiful, supportive, and slightly naive wife to complete the picture of your perfect life. An asset. You catastrophically misjudged your asset, Gideon. She then turned her attention to the board. For the past 4 months, she announced, her voice gaining strength and authority. I have been conducting a private investigation into my husband's financial activities, both personal and corporate. What I found was a systematic pattern of fraud and embezzlement, totaling over $18 million from Nexus Capital. A collective gasp went through the room. Board member Harold Chen, an old friend of Gideon's father, looked pale. This report, Naomi continued, gesturing to the copy in front of Gideon, contains irrefutable proof of every transaction. Bank records, wire confirmations, shell company registrations, and sworn affidavits from the private investigators I employed. Everything you need to remove him for cause is in there. Gideon felt the floor drop out from under him. This wasn't a divorce negotiation. This was a corporate coup. She had him cornered not as a cheating husband, but as a criminal. Naomi, please, he pleaded, his arrogance shattering, replaced by raw, desperate fear. We can talk about this, privately. We're long past private conversations. Gideon, she said. She then delivered the killing blow. I have, however, prepared a solution that avoids this becoming a public spectacle. Because despite your actions, I have no desire to see the father of my child in prison, or to have the value of this company and my son's future inheritance destroyed by a federal investigation. Benjamin Carter stepped forward, placing a second, much thinner folder on the table. This is a post-nuptial and severance agreement. The lawyer stated, his voice booming in the silence. Mr. Roth will resign as CEO and from the board effective immediately. He will plead no contest in our divorce proceedings, citing irreconcilable differences. He will forfeit 75% of his personal assets, including all Nexus stock, to a trust established for his and Naomi's child, Leo Roth. The remaining 25% will be used as restitution to the company to repay the funds he misappropriated. He will cede all rights to the Tribeca penthouse and all other shared properties. In exchange for his full and immediate compliance, the findings of Project Nightingale will be sealed, and this board will agree to frame his departure as a voluntary resignation for personal health reasons. It was a complete and total annihilation. He would be left with nothing. No job, no money, no home. He would be erased. "You can't do this," Gideon stammered, looking around at the board members, searching for an ally. He found none. They stared back at him with the cold eyes of investors who had just seen their life's work threatened by the very man they had trusted to protect it. Naomi picked up a pen from the table. She held it out to him. "You have two options, Gideon," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "You can sign this document, walk out of this building with what's left of your dignity, and start over. Or you can refuse, and Mr. Carter will walk these findings over to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. The choice is yours. You have 5 minutes." The king was checkmated. The master of the universe had been outmaneuvered. He looked at his wife, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw the brilliant, ruthless strategist. She had always been the woman he had been too arrogant and self-absorbed to ever truly know. And in her eyes, he saw the reflection of his own ruin. The 5 minutes Naomi gave him felt like both an eternity and a split second. Gideon's mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, 1,000 arguments and threats. But they all dissolved against the granite wall of her preparation. Every escape route was blocked. Every countermove had been anticipated. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, and she held the only key which she had no intention of using. He looked at the pen she held out to him. It was a simple black fountain pen. He had given it to her on their first anniversary, a symbol of the life they were supposed to write together. Now it was the instrument of his undoing. With a shaking hand he took the pen. The weight of it felt immense. He flipped to the last page of the agreement, his signature line waiting like an open grave. He could hear the frantic beating of his own heart, the only sound in the suffocating silence of the Olympus room. He signed his name, the name that had once been a hallmark of power and success. The ink looked black like poison on the crisp white page. He had just signed away his entire world. Benjamin Carter took the document, reviewed the signature, and gave Naomi a curt nod. It was done. A press release announcing your resignation for health reasons will be distributed in 1 hour. Naomi said, her voice now that of a CEO addressing a dismissed employee. Your corporate accounts and access have already been suspended. A security detail will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings. You have 15 minutes. After that, they will escort you from the building. She didn't wait for a reply. She turned, and without a single backward glance, walked out of the Olympus room, her lawyer following in her wake. The board members, as if released from a spell, began to murmur amongst themselves, avoiding his gaze. Robert, his COO, and now his successor, gave him a look that was a mixture of pity and contempt. The walk to his office, flanked by 2 stoic security guards, was the longest walk of his life. Employees peered out from their cubicles, whispering. The news was already spreading. The king was being deposed, paraded through his own fallen kingdom. His office, once his sanctuary, felt alien. Naomi had been thorough. His personal laptop was gone. The family photos on his desk were gone. All that remained were the trappings of his job industry awards, deal trophies, a whiteboard covered in now meaningless projections. He numbly packed a few personal effects into a cardboard box, a framed photo of his late father, a couple of books, the pen Naomi had left behind. 15 minutes later, he was standing on the curb outside the Nexus building holding a small, pathetic box of memories. The city bustled around him, indifferent to his spectacular fall from grace. He had no car, no driver. He was just another man on a New York street. He pulled out his burner phone and dialed Kendra's number. He needed someone, a familiar shore in this shipwreck. She answered on the second ring, her voice impatient. "Gideon. Are you done? I'm bored to death in this hotel room and the room service is mediocre." "It's over, Kendra," he said, his voice hollow. "Great. So what's the plan? Are we going back to St. Bart's tonight?" "No, you don't understand," he said, the words catching in his throat. "Everything is gone. The company, the money, the apartment, all of it. She took it all." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He could practically hear the gears turning in her mind, recalculating, reassessing her investment. "What do you mean she took it all?" Kendra's voice was sharp, stripped of its seductive warmth. "What about the money in the Caymans?" "Our money. It's part of the settlement." "Restitution," he choked out. "It's gone." Another pause, colder and longer than the first. When she finally spoke, her voice was unrecognizable. It was the voice of a creditor calling in a bad debt. "So let me get this straight," she said, her words dripping with venom. "You blew up your life, you brought me along for the ride, and you're walking away with nothing." "You have nothing. He started, but he had no answer. "You are a fool, Gideon," she hissed. "A weak, pathetic fool. Don't ever call me again." The line went dead. He stood there, phone in hand, as the full weight of his isolation crashed down upon him. He had betrayed his loyal, brilliant wife for a woman who had just discarded him like a bad investment the second his stock plummeted. He had traded a priceless treasure for a worthless piece of glass. He had nowhere to go. He couldn't face his parents. His friends were all business associates who would scatter now that he was powerless. He started walking with no destination in mind, just one of the millions of anonymous faces in the urban sprawl, a ghost haunted by the empire he had built and lost in a single day. The silence from Naomi was more damning than any scream could ever be. She hadn't just divorced him. She had deleted him. 6 months later, the city had shed its autumnal colors for the stark, crystalline beauty of winter. The frantic energy of Manhattan felt a world away from the quiet, tree-lined streets of Brooklyn Heights, where Naomi now lived. The Tribeca penthouse, a monument to a life that no longer existed, had been sold. Its cold, minimalist spaces and ghost-filled memories were traded for the warmth of a 4-story brownstone with original moldings and a small, snow-dusted garden out back. The air here smelled of old wood lemon polish and faintly of the baby powder and milk that now defined Naomi's world. Her life was no longer measured by galas and board meetings, but by feeding schedules and the miraculous weight of a sleeping child in her arms. Leo Prescott. Roth had arrived in late November, a healthy 7-pound declaration of the future. He was a perfect fusion of his parents, possessing Gideon's dark, thick hair and expressive brows, but with Naomi's calm, unnervingly perceptive grey eyes. Sometimes, when she looked at him, a pang of the past would echo in her heart, a phantom limb of a life she'd been forced to amputate. But then he would grasp her finger with his tiny, perfect hand, and the ghost would recede, replaced by a love so fierce and absolute it felt like the sun. This was her new empire, Not a glass tower scraping the sky, but the four walls of a home filled with light and the soft gurgle of a happy baby. Her days were a peaceful rhythm of domesticity, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. She managed the Leo Roth Trust with the same quiet precision she had used to dismantle Gideon's life. She had weekly calls with Robert Nexus Capital's new CEO, her input subtle but incisive, guiding the company her son would one day inherit. She had transformed from a silent partner into a silent ruler, her power more profound for being unseen. She was not a woman recovering. She was a woman remade, forged in the fires of betrayal, and stronger for the heat. One crisp December afternoon, she decided to take Leo for a walk. The air was frigid, but the sun was bright, glinting off the icy branches of the trees in the park. Leo was nestled in his stroller, swaddled in a cashmere blanket, his rosy cheeks the only part of him visible beneath a tiny woolen hat. The rhythmic crunch of Naomi's boots on the frosted path was a soothing percussion to the quiet of the day. It was a moment of perfect, earned peace. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She glanced at the screen, expecting it to be her mother, or perhaps Benjamin Carter, with a quarterly update. Instead, the screen showed a blocked, unknown number. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to dismiss it as a telemarketer intruding on her sanctuary. But something, a flicker of intuition, as cold and sharp as the winter air, made her pause. She stopped the stroller by a wrought-iron bench overlooking the East River and answered, her voice neutral. "Hello." A moment of static-filled silence, then a voice hesitant and rough, as if it hadn't been used for some time. "Naomi." Her breath caught in her throat. Her hand tightened on the handle of the stroller. The voice was an echo from a buried life stripped of its familiar timbre of command and arrogance, but it was unmistakably his. It was Gideon. She said nothing, her silence a shield. "Naomi." "Are you there?" he asked, a note of desperation creeping in. She finally found her voice, the words emerging colder than she intended. "What do you want, Gideon?" A ragged exhale on the other end of the line. I heard about the baby." He said the words tumbling out, as if he'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. "I saw a picture. A friend of a friend. They sent it to me. He's beautiful now." The old nickname, once a term of endearment, whispered in the dark, now felt like a trespass, a violation of the new life she had so carefully constructed. "He is," she replied, her voice flat. She looked down at Leo, who stirred slightly in his sleep, his little mouth making a soft, sucking motion. She felt a surge of protectiveness, so intense it was almost painful. I'm in a program," Gideon continued, his voice cracking. "A 12-step thing. For a lot of things. My therapist calls it pathological narcissism, ego, sex addiction. I'm trying to really understand why I did what I did, why I threw away everything." He paused, and she could hear the hollow sound of the room he must be in. "I'm working a job at a hardware store out in Queens, stocking shelves, mixing paint. It's humbling." Naomi imagined it, Gideon Roth, the man who wore $10,000 suits and commanded billion-dollar deals wearing a canvas apron, his hands dusty with spackle. The image should have brought a sense of satisfaction of schadenfreude. Instead, she felt a profound and weary sadness. The waste of it all. "I know I have no right to ask this," he said, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. "I know I gave up everything. I forfeited my rights. I signed the papers. But I was wondering if maybe someday, far in the future, I could see him. Just once. I don't want anything. I won't ask for money or forgiveness. I just want to see my son." The plea hung in the frozen air between them. Her mind, the forensic accountant's mind, saw it as a negotiation, a first move in a long game to re-enter their lives. Her heart, the mother's heart, heard only the broken plea of a father. She looked across the river at the Manhattan skyline, the glass towers like shards of a distant, painful memory. She had won. She had taken everything from him, just as he had planned to do to her. She had the power, the money, the control. And most importantly, she had their son. She could just say no. She could hang up the phone, block his number, and he would have no recourse. It would be a clean, final act of erasure. But then she looked down at Leo's sleeping face. She saw the shape of Gideon's jaw in the soft curve of her son's, the shadow of his brow over eyes that were all her own. One day, this tiny, innocent being would grow up. He would ask questions. He would have a void in his life in the shape of a father, and that void could fill with anger, with resentment, with a confusion that could poison him. Denying Gideon completely might protect her. But would it truly protect her son? Her entire plan had been about securing Leo's future. What kind of future would it be if it was built on a foundation of her own bitterness, however justified? The final act of her victory, she realized, could not be vengeance. It had to be grace. "Leo deserves to know his father," she said, finally, her voice clear and steady, the decision settling within her, solid and sure. "But you won't be his father until you become a man he can be proud of. You won't be the man on the cover of Forbes, and you won't be the man who stocks shelves in Queens. You have to become someone new." She could hear him holding his breath on the other end of the line. "So keep working your program," she continued, her voice, the sound of steel wrapped in velvet. "Stay sober. Find a life that has meaning beyond a balance sheet. Build something real, something that comes from your hands and your heart, not your ego. When you've done that for a long, long time, years, Gideon, you can call me again, and we'll see." It was not a yes. It was not forgiveness. But it was not a no. It was a chance, a sliver of light at the end of a long, dark tunnel of his own creation. It was more than he deserved, and it was a final, quiet testament to the strength of the woman he had so profoundly misunderstood. A choked, ragged sound came through the phone. A sob. "Thank you, Naomi," he whispered the two words, carrying the weight of his entire fallen world. "Thank you." She ended the call without saying goodbye, and slid the phone back into her pocket. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. She adjusted Leo's blanket, shielding him from the wind that swept off the river, and began to walk again. The path ahead was bathed in the golden light of the fading day. She was no longer Naomi Roth, the millionaire's wife, nor was she simply Naomi Prescott, the forensic accountant. She was Naomi, a mother, the architect of a new life, a survivor who had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only weathered the storm, but had emerged commanding the winds. Her past was settled. Her future and her son's was just beginning. The story of Gideon and Naomi Roth is a chilling reminder that the quietest people in the room are often the most powerful. It's a story about the devastating consequences of arrogance and a testament to the unbreakable strength of a woman who was pushed to the edge and decided to build a new world from the rubble of her old one. Gideon thought he was escaping a gilded cage, only to discover he had been living with a brilliant lioness who knew the value of patience and the art of the perfect trap. His betrayal was loud and reckless. Her response was silent, strategic, and absolute. What would you have done in Naomi's shoes? Could you have maintained such cold, calculated composure in the face of such a deep betrayal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of deception and empowerment, please smash that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good story, and make sure you hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. We have more tales of real-life drama and shocking twists coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Have you ever been so certain of your happiness that the thought of it shattering feels like a scene from a movie, not your own life? I had it all, a loving husband of 8 years, a beautiful home we'd built together, and our first child on the way. I was living the dream. But then a woman I'd never met called me, her voice dripping with pity, to inform me that my entire life was a lie. She was his real love, she said, and I was just an obligation. She thought she held all the cards. What she didn't know was that in my husband's world of carefully constructed lies, I was about to play an old recording that would burn it all to the ground. Our house on Maple Creek Lane wasn't just built of wood and stone. It was constructed from 8 years of shared dreams. Amelia Hayes, an interior designer by trade, had personally overseen every detail. The warm oak floors, the large bay window in the living room that caught the morning sun, the kitchen island where my husband, Lucas Sterling, would leave me coffee every morning before heading to his high-powered job in finance. Every corner held a memory, a testament to the life we had so carefully curated. At 34 and 7 months pregnant with our first child, a daughter we planned to name Olivia, I felt a sense of profound, settled contentment. Lucas, with his sharp suit's confident smile and the faint scent of expensive cologne, was the architect of our security. He was a partner at a downtown investment firm, a world of high stakes and long hours that I respected and supported. He was my rock, my confidant, my everything. We were that couple, the one our friends pointed to as proof that true, lasting love existed. The first crack in this perfect facade was almost imperceptible. It was a Tuesday night in late May. Lucas came home well past midnight, which wasn't unusual, but the excuse was. The servers crashed downtown, had to work with IT all night to get the trading platforms back online for the Asian markets. He'd mumbled, dropping his briefcase by the door and loosening his tie. I was in bed, propped up by pillows, a book resting on my swollen belly. "Oh, honey, that's awful. Are you hungry? I can heat up the casserole." "No, I'm exhausted. Just need a shower," he said, avoiding my eyes. He kissed my forehead, a fleeting, almost obligatory gesture. As he walked past, a scent wafted over to me. It wasn't his usual Tom Ford cologne. It was something lighter, floral, distinctly feminine. Perfume. I frowned. Maybe he'd been near a female colleague during the IT crisis. Plausible. I told myself to stop being silly. My hormones were making me paranoid. I pushed the thought away, chalking it up to the anxieties of a first-time mother. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, the cracks began to spiderweb. The late nights at the office became more frequent. Phone calls were suddenly taken on the back patio, his voice a low, intimate murmur. When I'd walk by, he'd abruptly change his tone, making it louder, more professional. "Yes, I understand the risk portfolio, Henderson. Send me the updated prospectus." But I'd heard the softer tone that preceded it. He became more attached to his phone than ever, its screen angled away from me with a practiced subtlety. Once he left it on the kitchen counter while he showered. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but a stronger, more desperate curiosity took hold. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked it up. Locked. Facial recognition. Of course, I put it back down, my hand trembling slightly. What was I doing? I was Amelia Hayes, and I trusted my husband. The gaslighting was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. "You seem a bit on edge lately, Ames," he said one evening, rubbing my shoulders as I stood looking out the bay window. "Is the pregnancy getting to you? You know you can talk to me about anything. You've just been so distant, Lucas. So busy." He sighed a long, weary sound. "Honey, I'm closing the biggest deal of my career. This sets us up for life. I'm doing this for us, for Olivia. I thought you understood that. The pressure is immense. The last thing I need is to feel like I'm being interrogated when I come home." He was so convincing. He expertly turned my valid concerns into an attack on his hard work, making me feel selfish and ungrateful. I found myself apologizing. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just being hormonal and emotional. I know you're working hard for us." He smiled, that charming, disarming smile that had made me fall in love with him at a college football game a decade ago. "That's my girl." The breaking point came not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a mouse. Lucas was on a 2-day business trip to Chicago. I was organizing our digital files, sorting through years of photos and documents to make space for the torrent of baby pictures to come. I decided to clean up our shared cloud drive, a digital attic filled with old receipts, travel confirmations, and forgotten documents. I clicked on a folder labeled Expense Reports, 2025. Inside were PDF receipts he'd uploaded for work. I was about to close it when my eyes caught on a file name, Receipt Hotel Celeste, 060425. The date was from 3 weeks ago, a night he was supposedly working late at the office. Hotel Celeste wasn't in Chicago. It was a chic boutique hotel in our city, less than 5 miles from his downtown office. My breath hitched. My fingers felt like ice as I double-clicked the file. The PDF opened. A one-night stay, a king suite, and a room service charge that made my blood run cold. Dinner for 2 oysters champagne, a filet mignon, and a chocolate lava cake. Total $342,050. It was a lover's cliché. And underneath another charge from the hotel's gift shop, a Sophie Beale Bras petite perle necklace. The name meant nothing to me, but the price tag did $1,250. I had never received such a necklace. I felt the baby kick a sharp, sudden jolt, as if she could sense my distress. I wrapped my arms around my stomach, a primal need to protect her from the poison that was now coursing through my veins. The perfume the late nights, the secret calls it, wasn't paranoia. It was intuition. It was the truth. I sat there in the silent house, the glow of the monitor illuminating my tear-streaked face. The man I had built my world around was a stranger. The foundation of our life wasn't stone. It was sand. And the tide was coming in. I didn't cry for long. The shock quickly morphed into something else. Something cool and hard and sharp. Anger. I wasn't just a hormonal pregnant woman. I was a woman who had been played for a fool, and I would not go down quietly. My mind started working the gears of my past self, the meticulous, detail-oriented designer grinding back to life. He had built a facade. I would be the one to orchestrate its demolition. The next morning I woke up with a chilling clarity. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was now insulated by a layer of cold resolve. I would not confront him. Not yet. A premature confrontation would only lead to more lies, more gaslighting, and a chance for him to cover his tracks. I needed more than a hotel receipt. I needed an airtight case. I needed undeniable, soul-crushing proof. My first call was to my best friend, Sarah Jenkins, a sharp-witted lawyer with a cynical view of the world. Sarah had been my maid of honor and my fiercest protector. Amelia. You're up early. Everything okay with the baby? She answered, her voice still thick with sleep. I took a shaky breath. Sarah. I need you. I think Lucas is having an affair. There was a pause, then the sound of rustling sheets. I'm on my way. Don't do anything. Don't say anything to him. Just act normal. I'll be there in 20 minutes with coffee and croissants. True to her word, Sarah arrived, her expression a mixture of fury and concern. I laid out the evidence on the kitchen island, the hotel receipt, the timeline of his late nights, the memory of the strange perfume. She listened intently, her lawyer's mind processing every detail. The bastard. She breathed, her knuckles white around her coffee mug. Amelia. I am so sorry. Don't be sorry, I said, my voice steady. Be my counsel. What do I do? We dig. Sarah said, her eyes glinting. We become archaeologists. We're going to unearth every single lie. That afternoon, with Sarah's guidance, I began the grim task of excavating my husband's secret life. The first step was practical. I called our mobile phone provider. Posing as the doting, slightly confused pregnant wife trying to consolidate our family plan, I managed to get a detailed call and text log for the past 6 months sent to my email. My husband is so busy, he asked me to handle it. But you know how it is with pregnancy brain. I can barely remember my own name. I'd chirped to the customer service agent, a performance that left a bitter taste in my mouth. The call log was a treasure map of deceit. There was one number that appeared with startling frequency. Dozens of calls, often late at night. Hundreds of texts. The calls were long, sometimes over an hour. I Googled the number. It was a mobile phone, no name attached. Next, the credit cards. I had access to our joint accounts. I meticulously went through months of statements cross-referencing dates with Lucas's work calendar. There were charges for dinners at intimate restaurants I'd never been to, flower deliveries to an address in a trendy downtown condo building, and payments to a high-end lingerie boutique. The Sophie Bille Brahe necklace from the hotel receipt now had context. It was all there, a digital breadcrumb trail of his betrayal. The final piece was the most painful. I needed a face, a name. Sarah, with her access to legal databases, ran the phone number. A hit. Chloe Reed. Sarah said over the phone, her voice grim. Age 26. Lives at the address where the flowers were sent. She's a junior financial analyst at Matheson & Co. one of the firms Lucas's company works with on the big merger deal. Chloe Reed. The name felt like a physical blow. I typed it into the search bar of Instagram. Her profile was public. My heart pounded as her life flashed before me on the screen. She was beautiful in a youthful, effervescent way that felt like a direct contrast to my own settled maternal state. There were pictures of her with friends, clinking champagne glasses on rooftop bars. There were photos of her in exotic locations that perfectly matched Lucas's business trips. A weekend in Miami in April. Best surprise getaway, a week in London in February. Feeling like the luckiest girl in the world. And then I saw it. A photo posted 3 weeks ago. It was a close-up of her neck and collarbone, showcasing a delicate pearl necklace. The Sophie Biel Brahe. The caption read, "Sometimes you meet a person and you just know that they are your person." My heart is so full. I scrolled further. Cryptic posts about a love that was complicated, but worth it. A picture of 2 wine glasses with the caption, "Celebrating our future." In the reflection of one of the glasses, I could just make out the blurred silhouette of a man in a suit. Lucas. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of my desk. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. This was a parallel life. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had built a completely separate world with this woman. A world where he was a romantic hero sweeping her off her feet. He was funding her lifestyle, her apartment, her happiness with the money he claimed to be earning for our family, for our daughter. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the nursery. The crib was assembled, the walls painted a soft shade of lavender. Tiny clothes were folded in the dresser. This room, once a symbol of our shared future, now felt like a stage for a tragic play. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of nostalgia for a time when I believed in our story, I opened my laptop again, not to look for more evidence, but for comfort. I navigated to my personal cloud storage to a folder I hadn't opened in years, simply labeled Memories. It was filled with old photos from college scans of love letters and short video clips from our early days. And then I saw the file Proposal Audio 05/12/2017 4A. My breath caught. I had completely forgotten about it. On the night he proposed during a picnic under the stars at our favorite spot overlooking the city, I had been so overwhelmed with emotion that I had surreptitiously hit the record button on my phone, wanting to capture his words forever. I had saved the audio file and forgotten all about it. My finger hovered over the play button. Did I really want to hear this? Did I want to hear the voice of the man I thought I was marrying, knowing what I knew now? With a sense of morbid curiosity, I clicked. Lucas's voice, younger, clearer, and filled with an earnestness that tore at my heart, filled the silent room. Amelia Hayes. The recording began his voice, thick with emotion. From the moment I saw you arguing with Professor Albright about Keynesian economics, I knew I was in trouble. You were brilliant and fierce, and you didn't even know I existed. For the last 2 years, you haven't just been my girlfriend. You've been my home. Everything I do, every ambition I have, it's all just a different path leading back to you. You are my compass, my anchor, my one and only truth in this world. There is no version of my life, no possible future that makes any sense without you in it. I love you more than I know how to say. So I'm asking you, will you make my life complete? Will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. I listened to my own choked sob on the recording, my whispered yes. It was the most beautiful, heartfelt declaration of love I had ever heard. And it was all a lie. Or was it? He must have meant it then. What had changed? Did it even matter? The man on that recording was dead. In his place stood a hollow stranger who spoke of risk portfolios and loved another woman. But as the audio file finished, the grief was replaced by a surge of electrifying power. I didn't just have credit card statements and phone logs anymore. I had his own words. I had his soul captured in an audio file from a time when he presumably still had one. This recording wasn't a painful memory. It was a weapon, and I knew exactly when and how I was going to use it. The plan began to form in my mind, intricate and precise, like one of my own design blueprints. A simple confrontation was beneath the scale of his betrayal. Exposing him to just me would allow him to wriggle free to spin more tales. No, the demolition had to be public. It had to be witnessed. The pillars of his carefully constructed life-family reputation, success, all had to come crashing down at once. The perfect stage presented itself a week later. His parents, Robert and Carol Sterling, were coming to town. They were lovely people, a classic old-money couple from Connecticut, who adored me and were ecstatic about their first grandchild. They had called to arrange a visit specifically to see the nursery and celebrate with us. Lucas, ever the devoted son, suggested we host a small family dinner at our house the following Saturday. Just us and my parents, he'd said, smiling at me over breakfast. A little celebration for Olivia before she arrives. We can show them everything you've done with the nursery. They'll be so thrilled. It was perfect. The ultimate audience. His adoring parents who saw him as the golden boy who could do no wrong. I spent the week preparing not just for the dinner, but for the performance of my life. I was the perfect, glowing, expectant mother. I discussed menu options with Lucas, feigned excitement about his parents' visit, and played the role of the happy, oblivious wife. Inside, I was a coiled spring of ice and fury. Every smile I gave him, every loving touch I accepted, felt like a betrayal of myself, but it was a necessary evil. I was setting the trap, and the bait had to be convincing. The day before the dinner, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, the same number I had traced to Chloe Reed. My heart leaped into my throat. I had expected to have to orchestrate this part of the confrontation myself, but it seemed my husband's arrogance was about to do the work for me. I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing my voice to sound calm, slightly questioning. Hello. Is this Amelia? The voice on the other end was young, confident, and laced with an infuriating note of condescending pity. It is. Who's calling? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. My name is Chloe Reed. She paused as if expecting the name to shatter me. I think we need to talk. About Lucas. Here it was, the moment I had been dreading and anticipating. I walked into the nursery and sat in the rocking chair, my hand resting on my belly. Okay, Chloe. I'm listening. Look, I don't want to do this over the phone, and I know this must be hard for you to hear, especially in your condition, she said, the word dripping with disdain. But you need to know the truth. Lucas and I are in love. He loves me. What he has with you is an obligation, a history. He was going to tell you, but he's been waiting for the right time after the baby is born. He doesn't want to cause you undue stress. The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. This girl fed a diet of Lucas's lies, truly believed she was the heroine of this story, and I was the tragic, clueless wife. He had probably told her I was emotionally unstable, that our marriage was one of convenience. He had painted a masterpiece of deception, and she was its primary subject. He told me he's only staying with you out of guilt. She continued, her voice gaining momentum. He said your marriage has been over for years, that you're more like roommates. He doesn't love you, Amelia. He's with me. You deserve to know that your whole life is a sham. I listened, letting her empty her arsenal of rehearsed lines. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange glacial calm settled over me. He told you all that, I asked, my voice soft. Yes. He wants to be with me, to build a real life, a life based on passion and real love, not just history. Passion. Real love. The phrases sounded so hollow, so cliché. They were the lines of a man trying to convince a naive young woman and himself that his betrayal was something noble. An idea bold and terrifying sparked in my mind. This was better than I could have planned. Chloe, I said, my voice now laced with a believable manufactured fragility. I don't know what to say. He's been working so hard. He's been so stressed. I thought we were happy. I let a small, pathetic sob escape my lips. It worked. Her tone softened slightly. I'm sorry. I know this is a shock, but it's better you know now. I need to see you. I said the words, tumbling out as if in a panic. I need to talk to you face to face. I can't believe this unless I hear it from you in person. There was a moment of hesitation on her end. I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, I begged, pouring every ounce of fake desperation I could muster into my voice. Tomorrow, come to my house. Lucas is having his parents over for a small dinner. They'll be here around 7. If you could come around 8, he'll be here. We can all talk this out. Like adults. It was a gamble, a huge one. I was inviting the viper into my nest, but I was counting on her ego. I was counting on her belief that she was the real love, and that her presence would force the issue, forcing Lucas to finally choose her in front of his family. To a 26-year-old who believed she was in a grand romance, it would be an irresistible, cinematic moment. You want me to come to your house while his parents are there? She asked, a note of surprise in her voice. Yes, I whispered. I want to see the way he looks at you. I need to see if it's real. Then I'll know, and I can let him go. Another pause. I could almost hear the calculations in her head, the fantasy playing out. She would arrive, the beautiful, honest truth-teller, exposing the loveless marriage and claiming her man. Okay, she finally said, her voice firm again, full of renewed conviction. Okay, Amelia, I'll be there. 8 o'clock. She hung up. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline. The stage was set. The actors had been summoned. All that was left was for the curtain to rise. I stood up and walked out of the nursery, leaving the ghosts of the past and the lies of the present behind me. Tomorrow I wouldn't be the victim. I would be the director. The evening of Saturday, August 1st, descended upon Maple Creek Lane with a breathtaking, fraudulent tranquility. The air in our home was thick with the savory aroma of rosemary roasted chicken and garlic potatoes, a scent I had always associated with comfort and celebration. The dining table, our grand oak centerpiece, was set for 5, with the gleaming Wedgwood china we reserved for Christmas and landmark anniversaries. I had polished the silver myself that afternoon, each methodical stroke a meditation, a preparation for battle. In the center, a bouquet of white tulips stood in a crystal vase, their pristine petals illuminated by the soft, flickering glow of a dozen candles. I had chosen them for their symbolism of forgiveness, a final secret act of irony that was for me alone. I moved through my home, a serene hostess, in a simple navy blue maternity dress that accentuated the proud swell of my belly. My hair was swept into a neat chignon, my makeup minimal. To any observer, I was the very picture of placid maternal contentment. On the inside, however, I was a coiled spring, a general surveying the battlefield just moments before sounding the charge. Every nerve ending was alight, every sense heightened. My composure was a dam, holding back a reservoir of cold, calculated fury. Lucas, my husband, was magnificent in his ignorance. He thrived in this atmosphere, effortlessly slipping into the role of the proud, adoring husband and expectant father. He was dressed in a crisp shirt and tailored trousers, looking every bit the successful man of the house. He complimented the aroma of the food, he rubbed my lower back with a proprietary air of affection, and he regaled his parents with tales of his latest triumphs at the firm. He was a master performer, completely cocooned in the impenetrable arrogance of a man who believes he is the sole author of his own reality. His parents, Robert and Carol Sterling, arrived precisely at 7, their faces beaming with undisguised joy. They were a handsome, distinguished couple from old Connecticut, money radiating an aura of quiet elegance and genuine warmth. Carol, smelling faintly of Chanel No. 5, enveloped me in a gentle, cautious hug, her perfectly manicured hand coming to rest on my stomach. "Amelia, my dear, you are simply glowing," she cooed, her eyes sparkling. "Motherhood suits you so beautifully." "She's a natural," Lucas interjected, draping a heavy arm around my shoulders, his thumb stroking my arm. "Handling everything like an absolute champion while I'm chained to my desk, closing these impossible deals. I don't know what I'd do without her." I smiled up at him, a placid, loving expression I had practiced in the mirror. Inside, I thought, "You have no idea what you're about to do without me. We are just so incredibly proud of you both." Robert added his voice, a deep, reassuring baritone, as he clapped Lucas on the back. He looked around the living room, his gaze sweeping over the custom bookshelves and the art we had collected. "Building such a beautiful home, a strong family. You've done well for yourself, son. Very well." The four of us settled in the living room, the heart of our home, the room where Lucas had sworn his love to me countless times. I served his parents wine and poured myself a glass of sparkling cider, the sweet bubbles a mockery of the bitter acid churning in my stomach. The conversation flowed easily, a gentle river of pleasantries. They asked about my health, about the baby's movements, about our plans for the nursery. Lucas dominated the conversation, of course, pivoting back to his work, to the immense pressure he was under, subtly reinforcing the narrative of his sacrifice for our family. "It's the final push on the Matheson merger," he explained, swirling the deep red liquid in his glass. "The due diligence is a killer, but integrity is everything in our business. One slip, one ethical lapse, and the whole house of cards comes down. You have to be beyond reproach." The hypocrisy was so potent, I could almost taste it. I simply nodded, playing the part of the supportive, slightly bored wife, while my mind catalogued his words, filing them away as further evidence. At their request, I gave them the grand tour of the nursery upstairs. Carol teared up at the sight of the assembled crib and the tiny dresses hanging in the closet. "Oh, it's just perfect, Amelia. Absolutely perfect. To think our first grandchild will be sleeping here so soon." Lucas stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, with a look of paternal pride so convincing it was chilling. He spoke of the future of teaching his daughter to throw a baseball, of walking her down the aisle one day. He was building a fantasy of the future, even as I was preparing to incinerate his present. We returned downstairs, the hands on the grandfather clock in the hall, ticking relentlessly, audibly, towards 8 o'clock. Each tick was a drumbeat, counting down the seconds to detonation. At 5 minutes to 8, I excused myself. "I'll just check on the chicken and bring in the first course," I announced with a smile. Lucas followed me into the warm, fragrant kitchen. "Everything is perfect, Ames," he whispered, cornering me between the counter and the island. He leaned in and kissed the top of my head, his cologne, the familiar Tom Ford scent, filling my senses. It was the scent of our life together, the scent of a lie. "My parents absolutely adore you. You know that, right? I love you so much." I looked up into his handsome, familiar face, the face I had loved since I was a girl, the face of a complete stranger. A profound, hollow sadness washed over me, a final pang of grief for the man I thought he was. I manufactured a soft smile. "I know, Lucas." We sat down at the beautifully appointed table. The candlelight danced across our faces, casting long, dramatic shadows. Lucas at the head of the table raised his glass. His face was alight with genuine happiness, a man wholly pleased with his life and his own performance in it. "I'd like to make a toast," he began, his voice resonating with sincerity. "To my incredible parents, Robert and Carol. Thank you for your endless love and for being the bedrock of our family. And to my amazing, beautiful wife, Amelia." He turned his beaming face to me. "My rock, the love of my life. You've given me a life better than I ever could have imagined, and now you're giving me the greatest gift of all. Our next chapter with little Olivia is going to be the best one yet. I can't wait to live it with you. To family. To family." Robert and Carol echoed, their faces glowing with pride and affection. As their crystal glasses clinked together in a harmonious chime, a sharp, discordant sound cut through the warmth. The doorbell rang. The sound was jarring an electric shock to the placid atmosphere. A flicker of genuine confusion crossed Lucas's face. He lowered his glass. "Are we expecting someone else?" "No," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of mild surprise. I calmly placed my linen napkin on the table beside my plate. "I'll get it." My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but my movements were fluid and unhurried. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping softly against the polished oak floor. Every eye was on me as I walked from the dining room, through the living room, and into the foyer. The house was silent save for the ticking of the clock. I felt like an actress walking onto a stage, every sense on high alert. I reached the heavy front door, my hand steady as I wrapped it around the cool, solid brass knob. I took one final deep, fortifying breath and pulled the door inward. There, bathed in the soft yellow light of the porch lamp, stood Chloe Reed. She was exactly as I had pictured her from her Instagram profile, though in person her ambition felt more palpable, more desperate. She wore a stylish black dress that was just a little too tight, her makeup a little too heavy for a quiet family dinner. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she held her chin high, but I could see the nervous tremor in her hands. Her eyes, wide and determined, darted past me, fixing on the domestic tableau in the dining room. From the corner of my eye, I saw Lucas. He had risen halfway from his chair, his body frozen in a strange, contorted posture. Every drop of blood had drained from his face, leaving it a waxy, ghostly white. His mouth hung slightly open. His toast, forgotten his expression, one of pure, unadulterated horror. He looked like a man who had just seen his own executioner walk through the door. Robert and Carol simply looked on, their faces etched with polite confusion. "Chloe," Lucas stammered, his voice a strangled whisper that barely carried across the room. What in God's name are you doing here?" Chloe ignored him completely. Her performance was not for him. It was for his parents and for me. She took a purposeful step across the threshold, bringing the faint floral scent of her perfume, the ghost scent from his shirts, into my home. Her gaze, filled with a potent cocktail of pity and resolve, landed on me before sweeping towards the Sterlings. "Hello?" she began, her voice shaking almost imperceptibly, but fortified with rehearsed conviction. "I am so terribly sorry to interrupt your dinner. My name is Chloe Reed." She took another deliberate step into the room, forcing Lucas to stumble backward. "I know this is a truly awful way for us to meet Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, but I could not in good conscience allow this deception to continue for another moment." Lucas finally found his voice, a strangled, panicked hiss. "Chloe, this is wildly inappropriate. This is not the time or the place." "It's never the right time for the truth, is it, Lucas?" she retorted, her confidence surging as she saw his panic. She turned her full attention back to his stunned parents, her voice softening into a tone of pained sincerity. "I'm here because Lucas and I are in love, deeply in love. He was going to leave Amelia. He's been agonizing over how to tell you both. He's only been staying with her out of a sense of duty, a sense of guilt because of the baby. But his heart, his future, that's with me." A sharp, audible gasp escaped from Carol Sterling. Her hand flew to her chest, as if to physically keep her heart from breaking. Robert's face, once warm and proud, was hardening into a mask of granite. "Lucas, what is the meaning of this?" Robert demanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "She's lying," Lucas sputtered, finally lashing out his eyes wide with frantic desperation. He began to invent, to weave a new lie on the spot. She's a junior analyst from a partner firm. She developed an unhealthy fixation on me. I tried to let her down gently, but she's been harassing me. She's unstable, Amelia, honey. Tell them this is completely insane." Every head in the room swiveled to me. I had remained silent, a calm island in a hurricane of chaos. I let the silence stretch, letting his frantic, pathetic lies hang in the air and rot. Chloe looked smugly triumphant. Lucas looked at me with pleading eyes, begging me to validate his lie to save him. I finally moved. I walked slowly, deliberately to the head of the dining table, to the spot where Lucas had stood just minutes before, toasting our love. I looked at Chloe, my expression not one of anger, but of a kind of clinical pity. "You believe you're his real love?" I asked, my voice slicing through the tension, clear and steady. "He told you our marriage was a loveless obligation, that he didn't love me." "Yes," Chloe said, her chin jutting out defiantly. "He told me everything." "I see," I said, nodding slowly. "The thing about Lucas, you see, is that he tells many stories. He is a wonderful storyteller. He told you a story of a tragic, trapped man finding his soulmate. It's a beautiful story. I'm sure in those moments when he was telling it to you, he was incredibly convincing." I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out my phone. My hand did not tremble. My eyes locked with Lucas's. The terror that had been simmering in them all evening now boiled over into pure, abject dread. He knew what was coming. "Lucas," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, which only made it sound more menacing. "You seem to have forgotten some of the other stories you've told. It's so hard to keep them all straight, isn't it? Let me help you remember one of them. With a few deliberate taps on the screen, I connected my phone to the Sonos speaker system that we had installed throughout the house. A small blue light on the speaker in the living room blinked once, signifying the connection. A moment of pristine, perfect silence hung in the air, a collective held breath. And then a voice filled the room. His voice. Younger, clearer, aching with an earnestness that was now grotesque in its sincerity. Amelia Hayes. The recording began his voice thick with raw, unfiltered emotion. From the moment I saw you arguing with Professor Albright about Keynesian economics, I knew I was in trouble. You were brilliant and fierce, and you didn't even know I existed. For the last 2 years, you haven't just been my girlfriend. You've been my home. Everything I do, every ambition I have, it's all just a different path leading back to you. You are my compass, my anchor, my one and only truth in this world. There is no version of my life, no possible future, that makes any sense without you in it. I love you more than I know how to say. So I'm asking you, will you make my life complete? Will you marry me? The audio played out each word, a spectral bullet from the past, tearing through the tissue of his present-day lies. When the recording ended with the sound of my own tearful whispered "Yes." The silence that crashed down upon the room was absolute, profound, and devastating. I watched Chloe's face. It was a slow-motion demolition. The defiant confidence shattered, first replaced by confusion, then by a flicker of dawning comprehension, and finally by the vacant, hollow-eyed horror of complete and utter realization. The romantic words he had whispered to her, the promises of a future, she understood now that they were not original. She was not his one great love. She was an echo, an affair built on plagiarized lines and recycled sentiment. Then I looked at my husband. Lucas was a husk. The color had not returned to his face. He was a portrait in shades of gray. His shoulders were slumped, his body seemingly having collapsed in on itself. He was utterly exposed, stripped naked by his own words, haunted and condemned by the ghost of a better man. Carol was weeping openly now, quiet, heartbroken sobs shaking her entire body as she stared at her son with revulsion. Robert was perfectly still, his face like a stone carving his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Finally, I turned my gaze back to the two of them, the architect of this ruin and his last failed project. The difference between you and me, Chloe. I said, my voice resonating with a power I never knew I possessed, is that when I was told a story, I was smart enough to keep the receipts. And the difference between the man on that recording and the man standing in this room, I said, my eyes boring into my husband's, is that one of them had a soul. I took a deep, cleansing breath, the first truly easy breath I had taken in months. I was no longer a victim in their story. I was the author of its ending. Now both of you get out of my house. Chloe was the first to break. The silence left by the echo of my husband's recorded voice was too heavy for her flimsy confidence to bear. A choked, guttural sob ripped from her throat, a sound of utter humiliation. Her carefully constructed fantasy had been publicly, brutally dismantled. She didn't look at Lucas. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were wild, unseeing as she spun around and fled her stylish heels, clattering a frantic, desperate rhythm on the oak floors and down the stone steps of the front porch. The sound faded into the night, leaving a void that was somehow more damning than the confrontation itself. Lucas remained a statue, carved from ash and disbelief. His entire world had just detonated. and he was standing at its epicenter. His eyes, stripped of their usual confident sparkle, finally found mine. They were begging, pleading for a lifeline, for a hint of the forgiving Amelia he had known and so expertly manipulated for years. "Amelia," he began, his voice a hoarse, broken thing. I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like." Before another lie could form on his lips, Robert Sterling's voice cut through the air like a sheet of ice. "No." The single word was delivered with such quiet, absolute authority that Lucas flinched as if struck. "You cannot explain this. You will not try. You will not say another word to this woman." Robert, who I had only ever known as a jovial, warm-hearted patriarch, now looked like a wrathful god. He rose from his chair, his movements stiff with a rage that seemed to vibrate in the very air around him. He walked not to me, but to his son, stopping a foot away. His face was a mask of cold fury and profound disappointment. "We raised you to be a man of honor," Robert said, his voice low and trembling with suppressed fury. "We taught you that your word was your bond. We celebrated this marriage. We welcomed this wonderful woman into our hearts as our own daughter, and you have desecrated all of it. You have not only destroyed your marriage and brought shame upon your wife as she carries your child, but you have also disgraced the name of Sterling. I have never in my 70 years been more ashamed than I am in this moment looking at you." He did not shout. He did not need to. Each word was a perfectly aimed blow, landing with devastating precision. Lucas visibly shrank under the weight of his father's condemnation, his head bowing in the first genuine display of shame I had seen all night. Carol, her face pale and streaked with mascara, came to my side. She bypassed her son as if he were a piece of furniture, taking my hand in both of her trembling ones. "Amelia, my dear girl," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "There are no words. There are no apologies deep enough to cover this sin. You are our family. Please, whatever happens, know that you are still our family. What he has done, it is unforgivable." She squeezed my hand, a silent promise of allegiance, before turning to her husband. "Robert, let's go. We cannot stay here." Robert gave a curt nod, his gaze still fixed on Lucas with utter contempt. "You will hear from me tomorrow," he stated, a clear threat hanging in the air. Then he turned his back on his son, a gesture of finality more powerful than any argument. He and Carol walked out of the house, closing the door softly behind them, leaving Lucas and me alone in the cathedral of our ruined life. The silence that descended was suffocating. Lucas finally dared to move toward me, his hand outstretched, a pathetic, pleading gesture. "Ames, please, don't listen to them. Listen to me. We can fix this. I swear we can go to counseling. It was a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake. She meant nothing." I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt nothing. The love, the anger, the pain, it had all been cauterized, leaving behind only a sterile, cold clarity. "A mistake, Lucas," I said, my voice eerily calm. "A mistake is taking the wrong turn on the highway. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This wasn't a mistake. This was a project. You managed it with the same meticulous detail you apply to your financial portfolios. You compartmentalized. You lied. You created an entirely separate life, funded by the trust I gave you freely. You built a narrative for her, where I was the villain, and a narrative for me, where you were the hero. That isn't a mistake. That is a masterpiece of deception." He flinched, the word project hitting its mark. "No, I love you. I always have. That recording, that was real. That was me. Yes, it was. I agreed, a sad, bitter smile touching my lips. And that's the tragedy. I think you even believe that right now. But that man is gone. You killed him with 1,000 tiny cuts, 1,000 lies. You want to fix this as you can't fix something that you have systematically ground into dust. The only thing you've managed to fix tonight is my eyesight. For the first time in a very long time, I see you clearly. I turned my back on him just as his father had done and walked away. I didn't run. I walked up the stairs, each step feeling impossibly heavy, as if I were wading through water. I went into the nursery, the one room that was supposed to be about the future, and closed the door. The lock clicking shut was the signal for my own facade to crumble. My body began to shake uncontrollably. I slid down the wall, my hands clutching my belly, and I wept. It wasn't the loud, theatrical sobbing of a tantrum. It was a deep, silent, body-racking grief for a death. The death of my marriage, the death of the man I loved, the death of the future I had so happily and naively planned. I mourned the loss of our shared jokes, the comfortable silences, the decade of memories now irrevocably tainted. In that moment, the baby kicked a strong, definitive thump against my hand. It was an anchor in the storm, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. A reminder that my life was not in fact over. It was about to begin, in a way I had never imagined. The next morning, Sarah was at my door with coffee and a lawyer's ferocity. The divorce proceedings were swift and merciless. With Sarah as my advocate, and with the mountain of evidence I had collected, the phone logs, the credit card statements, the hotel receipts, and the sworn affidavits from his own parents. About the events of that night, Lucas had no ground to stand on. He was advised to concede to every one of my demands. The house, a significant portion of his assets, and a generous child support agreement were settled without a fight. Within a week on a day, I made sure to be out of the house. He moved his things. I returned to find empty spaces in the closet and gaps on the bookshelves. But the house felt lighter, cleaner, as if a poison had been purged from its very walls. The fallout for Lucas was catastrophic. His firm, terrified of the reputational damage, didn't fire him, but they did something far more humiliating. They moved him to a windowless office in the compliance department, a gilded cage where his sterling charm was useless. His career trajectory flatlined. His parents, true to their word, maintained a frosty distance, their support now directed solely towards me and their unborn grandchild. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe had vanished. Her social media was deleted, her number disconnected. She had resigned from her job and moved back to Ohio. Her ambition and her heart broken, a casualty of a war she never truly understood. She was fighting. My own war was with the ghosts in my house. The silence was a constant companion. To combat it, I began a methodical process of reclamation. I hired painters, and with a strange sense of liberation, rolled gallons of warm, sunny yellow paint over the cool, sophisticated grey Lucas, and I had chosen for our bedroom. I sold the dining table, unable to look at it without replaying that horrible night. In its place, I bought a small, round, antique table, perfect for just me and a high chair. I started therapy, learning to untangle the web of gaslighting that had made me doubt my own intuition for so long. It was an exorcism not just of a man, but of the version of myself who had been his willing audience. 2 months later, with Sarah holding one of my hands and a nurse holding the other, I gave birth to a perfect 7-pound baby girl. As they laid her on my chest, her tiny face scrunched and her cry filling the room. I felt a wave of love so fierce and absolute it knocked the breath out of me. I looked at her, this tiny innocent soul, who was half me and half a man I no longer knew, and I knew I couldn't name her Olivia. That name belonged to the ghost of my old life. I looked at her again, at the unwritten future in her eyes, and I thought about the unearned forgiveness Lucas had expected and the state of being I now craved for myself. "Her name is Grace," I whispered. A year later, the house on Maple Creek Lane was a different place. The silence was gone, replaced by the joyful shrieks of a toddler discovering the world, the sound of cartoons on the television, and the music I played loudly while I cooked. My interior design business, which I had put on the back burner, was now thriving. My portfolio was filled with homes I had helped other families create, each project a testament to my own resilience. One sunny afternoon, I stood in my kitchen, watching Grace chase butterflies in the backyard. She stumbled, fell onto the soft grass, and looked up at me with a pout that quickly melted into a giggle. In that moment, watching my happy, fearless daughter in the yard of our home, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The demolition of my old life hadn't been an ending. It had been a clearing. It had been the painful, necessary raising of a beautiful but unstable structure to make way for something smaller, perhaps, but infinitely more real and built on a foundation of unshakable truth. I was no longer a wife. I was a mother, a business owner, a survivor, a creator. I was whole, not because someone completed me, but because I had rebuilt myself from the ground up. That's where my story ends, but it's also where my new life began. It's a harsh reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most are capable of the deepest betrayals. But it's also a story about finding strength in the absolute worst moments. My husband and his mistress thought they were rewriting my life, but they only gave me the pen to write a much better chapter. One of independence, resilience, and a love for my daughter that is more real than any lie he ever told. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight your way out of the darkness and find your own strength, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and reclaiming your power. Remember, you are the author of your own story. Make it a masterpiece.